Hello there, and welcome to Deep Earth Stories. Get comfortable, turn the lights down if you can. Because what we are about to explore together has been waiting a very, very long time for someone to listen. But before that, please subscribe to my channel and tell me in comments where are you listening from and what time is there right now. Welcome, come in from the cold, find a comfortable place to rest. Maybe you're already lying down, wrapped in something soft and warm. Maybe the room around you is quiet, or maybe there is a faint sound somewhere nearby. A fan, a distant car, the hum of a house settling into the night. Whatever is around you right now, let it be there. You do not have to change anything. Just breathe in, slowly, and breathe out, even more slowly. Tonight, we are going on a journey together. A very long, very calm journey, and the beautiful thing about this journey is that you do not have to stay awake for it. You do not have to remember every word. You do not have to try at all. All you have to do is listen and let the words carry you somewhere quiet. Where are we going? We're going to the bottom of the world, to a place so far away, so cold, so enormous, and so strange that most people will never see it with their own eyes. A place that has existed for millions of years, long before there were any human eyes to see it. A place covered in ice so deep and so old that the layers near the bottom were formed before your great-great-great-grandparents were born, before their grandparents were born, before anyone you've ever heard of was born. We're going to Antarctica, the frozen continent, the last great wilderness. The place at the end of the map, and tonight we are not going there in a rush. We are not going there as explorers with heavy boots and urgent missions. We are drifting there, slowly, the way a single snowflake drifts down from the sky, unhurried, weightless, soft. There is no need to keep your eyes open for this. In fact, if your eyes feel heavy already, that is a very good sign. Let them be heavy. Let the words come to you like music, like weather, like something you can feel without fully understanding. The story will be here, whether you're fully awake or half dreaming. And sometimes, the half dreaming is the best place to hear a story like this. So breathe again, slowly, and let's begin. Before we talk about what is there now, I want you to hold one simple question in your mind. Not a scary question, not an urgent one. Just a quiet, wondering kind of question. The kind you might ask while looking up at the stars on a clear night. Here it is. What if the world has been unrecognizable before? What if the Earth we think we know, the Earth with its oceans and continents and seasons, has looked completely different many times over a history so long that our entire human story is just a tiny flicker at the very end of it? Hold that question gently. You do not need to answer it. Just let it float there. And here is one more. What if, buried under 2 miles of ice, there is a world waiting? Not a dangerous world, not a world that threatens us, just a world that is very, very old. A world of ancient lakes and hidden mountains and creatures long gone, preserved in frozen silence like a memory the Earth has not yet decided to let go of. C1. Let those questions rest in you as we begin. Chapter 1. The edge of the world. Picture the Southern Ocean on a winter night. You're on a ship far from shore. There is no shore visible in any direction. The sky above is enormous, bigger than any sky you've ever seen on land because there is nothing here to break it. No buildings, no trees, no hills, just water and sky meeting at a long dark horizon. The air is cold, not the cold of a winter morning when you step outside and feel a little shiver. This is a deeper cold, a heavier cold. The kind of cold that has no interest in you at all. It is simply there, enormous and patient, the way the ocean is simply there. The water around the ship is dark, almost black. It moves in long, slow swells. You can feel them beneath you, gentle and hypnotic, rising and falling. Okay, you're rising and falling. And then far ahead, you see something. At first it looks like a low cloud on the water, a pale, white shape along the horizon. But as the ship moves closer, you realize it is not a cloud. It is a white wall of ice rising from the sea. Flat on top, perfectly flat like a table, or like the edge of something vast and impossible. This is the Ross Ice Shelf, and it is one of the first things most visitors to Antarctica see. It is a floating platform of ice connected to the main continent that stretches for hundreds of kilometers along the edge of the Ross Sea. In some places, the ice face rises 30 meters above the water, 30 meters of solid ice standing at the edge of the ocean like a cliff. When the first explorers from Europe reached this place in the 1800s, they had no words for it. They had sailed through storms and ice floes and weeks of grey ocean, and then they arrived here, at this wall, and stopped. There was nowhere to go. The wall stretched as far as they could see in both directions. One of those explorers, a British naval officer named James Clark Ross, described it as sailing along the base of an enormous white cloud. He could not find a way through. He could not find a way around. He simply looked at it, made his notes, named what he could, and turned back. He called it the Great Barrier. And standing there at the railing of his wooden ship in the 1840s, looking at that wall of ice in the freezing southern air, James Clark Ross had no idea, no way of knowing, that he was looking at the edge of a continent almost twice the size of Australia. A continent buried entirely under ice. A continent that held almost 90% of all the freshwater on Earth, locked in solid form. He just saw a wall, and the wall didn't explain itself. Antarctica is like that. It keeps its secrets slowly. It gives them up only when you stay very still and pay very close attention. And even then, it only shows you one small piece at a time. Tonight, we're going to look at many of those pieces, slowly, gently, the way the ice shelf reveals itself to a ship moving quietly through the dark water. There is no rush. Chapter 2. A continent like no other. Let me tell you a few things about Antarctica that might surprise you. The first thing is this. Antarctica is a real continent. Not just a big piece of ice floating in the ocean, but an actual land mass. Rock and mountains and valleys underneath all that ice. If you somehow removed all the ice, you would find a continent with peaks and valleys and coastlines. A real piece of the Earth's rocky crust sitting at the bottom of the world. But you would not quite recognize it, because the ice is so heavy, so unimaginably, crushingly heavy, that the land beneath it has been pushed down, pressed down by the weight of the ice, like a cushion slowly compressed by something enormous resting on top of it. In some parts of Antarctica, the land beneath the ice is actually below sea level, not the ice surface. The ice surface is very high, but the ground underneath, the actual rock, is lower than the ocean around it. If the ice melted, those areas would be flooded by the sea. The shape of the continent would change. New bays and channels would appear where there is now only blank white flatness. The ice changes everything, and the ice has been there for a very long time. Antarctica began to freeze over around 34 million years ago. Before that, it was different. Very, very different. If you'd been standing on this land 35 million years ago, you might not have recognized it as Antarctica at all. The climate was warmer, there were forests, there were animals. The continent was not always the ice-locked wilderness it is today. We will talk more about that later, as the night goes on. The deep history of Antarctica is one of the most quietly astonishing things in all of science. But let's not rush there yet. We're still getting comfortable, still settling in. The second surprising thing about Antarctica is its size. Antarctica is the 5th largest continent on Earth. It is larger than Europe. It is roughly 14 million square kilometres. That is an enormous area, larger than the United States and Mexico combined, and yet almost no one lives there. There are research stations scattered across the continent, small clusters of buildings where scientists from many countries come to study the ice, the air, the wildlife, and the stars. At the height of summer, when the sun never sets, and the temperatures are merely very cold rather than brutally cold, there might be around 5,000 people on the entire continent. 5,000 people on a landmass larger than Europe. In winter, that number falls to around 1,000. 1,000 people on 14 million square kilometres of ice and rock and wind. Picture that. Picture the vast distances of white silence that exist between those tiny clusters of warm buildings. Picture the empty plains of snow, the frozen mountains, the deep blue glaciers, the dark polar sky. All of that enormous ancient landscape sitting quietly in the cold, unbothered. It is one of the few places left on Earth that is almost entirely untouched by human life. And there is something deeply peaceful about that, even from a great distance. Maybe you can feel it right now. That sense of enormous quiet, of something old and patient and very, very still. If your breathing has slowed a little since we started, that is good. That is exactly where we want to be. Chapter 3. The Light That Does Not Set. Let me tell you about Antarctic summer light, because it is one of the strangest and most beautiful things about this place. Imagine waking up at 3 in the morning and looking out the window, or out of the small porthole of a research station, and seeing full daylight. Not the pale grey light of early morning. Full, golden, warm-looking sunlight pouring across the ice. In the middle of an Antarctic summer, the sun does not set. Not for weeks. Not for months. Because of the way the Earth tilts on its axis, Antarctica in December and January receives sunlight almost around the clock. The sun moves in a slow circle across the sky, dipping low near the horizon but never quite disappearing below it. It is called the midnight sun, and it creates a kind of timeless, dreamlike quality to life there. Scientists at summer research stations talk about the strange feeling of losing track of time, of eating dinner and then stepping outside into bright sunshine and feeling briefly confused. Was it morning? Was it evening? The usual signals that our bodies rely on to know when to sleep and when to wake begin to blur. The light is golden and soft at certain hours, when the sun sits low on the horizon and its rays pass through a long angle of atmosphere. Everything turns amber and pink and pale gold. The snow catches the colour and holds it. Long shadows stretch across the ice in every direction, and the whole world looks like it is glowing from within. It is the kind of light that makes people stop what they are doing and just look. Just stand there in the cold and look. There is something about Antarctic light in summer that people who have seen it find very hard to describe. Scientists and explorers and support staff all say more or less the same thing. It does not look quite real. It looks like a painting, or a dream, or something between the two. And then the season turns. The Earth tilts the other way, and summer ends, and the darkness comes. Antarctic winter is the opposite extreme, where summer brings endless light, winter brings endless darkness. The sun disappears below the horizon and does not come back for weeks. Some parts of Antarctica see no sunlight at all for nearly 4 months. 4 months of dark. The winter temperatures drop to levels that are hard to imagine from the warmth of your bed tonight. In the interior of the continent, far from the coast, winter temperatures can fall to -60, -70, even -80 degrees Celsius. The coldest temperature ever recorded on Earth was measured at a Soviet research station in Antarctica in 1983. It was minus 89.2 degrees Celsius. That is cold enough to freeze the moisture in your breath instantly. Cold enough that your skin would be damaged in seconds without full protection. Cold enough that liquid fuel can freeze. Cold enough that the metal of machines can become brittle. The people who choose to stay through the Antarctic winter, the small crews who keep the research stations running through those dark, frigid months, undergo a very careful selection process, not just for physical endurance, for psychological endurance too, for the ability to live in close quarters with a small group of people in near total darkness, in a cold so extreme that going outside requires full preparation, is for months at a time. Many of them describe the experience as one of the most profound of their lives. The darkness is not just a lack of light, it is a presence, something immense and complete. The stars, when the sky's clear, are extraordinary, brighter and more numerous than almost anywhere else on Earth, because the air in Antarctica is the driest on the planet, and there is no light pollution for thousands of kilometers in any direction. People who have seen the Antarctic winter sky describe it as overwhelming. The Milky Way is not just a faint smear of pale light, the way it looks from most cities. It is a river, a glowing, textured river of 100 billion stars arching from one horizon to the other, and below those stars the ice, white and still and endless, faintly lit by starlight. Just breathe. You do not have to picture all of this perfectly. Just let some of it drift through. The cold, the light, the dark, the stars, the ice that goes on forever. Chapter 4. What the Ice Remembers. Here is something I want you to hold gently, because it is one of the most beautiful ideas in all of Earth science. The ice in Antarctica is not just frozen water, it is a record, a very, very long record. Every year snow falls on Antarctica. That snow compresses under the weight of new snow above it, slowly turning to ice, and as it does, it traps tiny bubbles of the air that was present when the snow fell. Those air bubbles contain samples of the atmosphere from thousands of years ago, hundreds of thousands of years ago, in the oldest, deepest ice cores that scientists have drilled from the Antarctic ice sheet, ski war. Those air bubbles have been found to contain air from more than 800,000 years ago. 800,000 years of atmosphere preserved in ice. Scientists drill long cylinders of ice, sometimes several kilometers long, and bring them up to the surface very carefully, like pulling a thread from a vast frozen tapestry. Then they study those bubbles. They measure the gases inside, and from those tiny bubbles they can read the history of the Earth's climate across almost 1 million years. They can tell you how warm it was, how much carbon dioxide was in the air, how the ice ages came and went in slow rhythms like breathing, cold, then warm, then cold again, over and over across the deep centuries. The ice remembers everything, and it keeps that memory frozen, perfectly still in the dark and the cold. There is something almost unbearably tender about this, I think. That the snow that fell on a quiet Antarctic plain 200,000 years ago, on a day when nothing human existed to notice it, when the Earth turned in the dark with no one to watch, that snow is still there. That day is still there in a way. A bubble of air, a whisper of an ancient atmosphere, preserved inside a column of ice at the bottom of the world. We can go back and read it. We can know what the air was like on a day that no one was alive to breathe it. There is something in that which I find deeply comforting, not in a logical way, just in a soft, quiet way. The feeling that time keeps things, that the Earth holds on to its history, that even things which seem gone are not entirely gone, Maybe that is true of more than just ice. But let's not push that thought too hard tonight. Let it just be a soft idea, floating in the dark. If your eyes are closed, that is wonderful. If you're drifting, that is exactly right. The story will keep going while you rest. Chapter 5. The Shape of the Land Below Now. I want to take you deeper, under the ice. Scientists have been mapping the hidden landscape beneath Antarctica's ice for many decades, using a technique called radar sounding. They send pulses of radio waves down through the ice, sometimes from aircraft flying overhead, and measure how those waves bounce back from the rock below. From those echoes, they build a picture of what Antarctica looks like without its ice. And the picture is remarkable. There are mountains beneath the ice, real mountains, tall ones. The Gamburtsev mountain range sits beneath the centre of Antarctica, under more than 3 kilometres of ice. It has peaks as high as 3,000 metres. It has valleys and ridges and steep slopes. It looks, in the radar images, like a perfectly normal mountain range. But no one has ever seen it. No human eye has ever looked at these mountains directly. They have been buried under ice for tens of millions of years. They are there, real and solid and enormous, in total darkness, in total silence, under an enormous weight of frozen water. There are also valleys beneath the ice, deep ancient valleys carved by rivers that flowed there long ago, before the freezing began. And there are lakes, not frozen lakes, liquid water lakes. This is one of the most astonishing discoveries in Antarctic science. And we'll spend more time with it later in our journey. But for now, just let the idea settle. Beneath kilometres of ice, under tremendous pressure, in a darkness more complete than anywhere on Earth, there are lakes of liquid water, real lakes, with real water that has been isolated from the rest of the world for millions of years. The largest of these is called Lake Vostok. It sits beneath the Russian Vostok Research Station, about 4 kilometres under the ice. It is roughly the size of Lake Ontario in North America, one of the Great Lakes. It is about 250 kilometres long and 50 kilometres wide, and it has been sealed off from the surface of the Earth for somewhere between 15 and 25 million years. Think about that gently, the way you might think about a very old story told very softly. Not a lake, sitting in the dark for 20 million years. The water in that lake has had no contact with sunlight, no contact with the atmosphere above, no contact with anything from the outside world. It has just been there, in the deep dark, under the ice, for longer than our entire human genus has existed. What is in that water? Are there living things down there? Scientists believe there might be. We will explore that question too later in the night, when we are a little deeper into the story. For now, just rest with the image. A lake, in the dark, very deep and very still, like something waiting patiently, like sleep itself. Sleep reset. I want to pause here for just a moment. We've covered quite a lot of ground tonight, and that is more than enough for this early part of the journey. We have sailed to the edge of the ice shelf. We have learned about the size and shape of the frozen continent. We have talked about summer light and winter darkness, and the old memory that ice keeps inside itself. And we have just glimpsed, just the beginning of a glimpse, at the hidden world beneath. There is much more ahead, but none of it needs to arrive all at once. Maybe your breathing is slower now than when we started. Maybe your body feels a little heavier, a little softer against whatever surface you're resting on. That is good. That is your body doing what it is supposed to do. If you feel a yawn coming, let it come. Do not try to hold it back. If your mind is beginning to wander, if the images are becoming a little blurry, a little mixed with your own quiet thoughts, that is perfectly fine. That is the border between waking and sleeping, and it is a very pleasant place to be. You're safe, the night is quiet, and the story will wait for you. patient as ice. Chapter 6. The first humans to arrive. Let us drift now to history, to the people who first came to this frozen place, and what they found and what they felt. For most of human history, Antarctica was unknown. Not mysterious, not unexplored, unknown. Completely outside the awareness of every civilization on Earth. The ancient Greeks had a theory that there must be a large landmass at the southern end of the world, to balance the lands of the north, they thought, and they called this imagined place Antarcticos, which simply meant opposite the bear, referring to the northern constellation Ursa Major the Bear. But they never went there, no one did, news for a very long time. The Southern Ocean was too cold, too remote, too difficult. The storms in the latitudes between 40 and 60 degrees south were notorious among sailors. They called these regions the Roaring Forties and the Furious 50s and the Screaming 60s, names that tell you everything you need to know about the conditions there. For centuries, European sailors pushed further and further south without finding land. They found ice. They found terrible storms. They found waves larger than buildings, but no land. Then, in January 1820, 3 separate expeditions caught sight of the Antarctic coastline within days of each other. A British naval officer named Edward Bransfield was one of them. A Russian expedition led by Fabian von Bellingshausen was another. An American sealing captain named Nathaniel Palmer rounded out this strange triple coincidence. None of them could be sure at first what they were seeing. The coastline was distant. The conditions were difficult. The ice made everything hard to read, but they saw it. A dark line against the white. Land. The southernmost land on Earth. And then, like James Clark Ross at the ice shelf a few years later, they looked at it, made their notes, and turned back. The continent was not welcoming. It offered nothing that sailors needed. No harbour, no timber, no fresh water they could easily access, no signs of anything worth the enormous danger of trying to land. They left, and Antarctica was left alone again. For another 80 years it remained largely untouched. Seal hunters and whale hunters came to the edges, where the Southern Ocean was rich with life. But the interior of the continent, the vast, empty, icy interior, waited. It was not until the early 20th century that men actually tried to cross it, to walk into that interior, to see what was there. And those stories are among the most extraordinary human adventures ever recorded. We will spend time with them in the next part of our journey, but for now, let me just tell you this. The men who went to Antarctica in those early years, who sailed through the screaming Southern Ocean, who camped on the ice in temperatures that froze their breath and cracked their skin, who walked hundreds of kilometers in the dark, those men were not doing it for practical reasons. Not entirely. There was no goal to find, no trade route to establish, no obvious benefit. They went because they wanted to know, because the blank space on the map felt like an invitation, because human beings, perhaps more than anything else, are drawn toward the unknown, not the frightening unknown, but the quiet, vast, patient unknown, the kind that sits at the edge of the map and says simply, "Come and see, come and see." That is what Antarctica says even now, and tonight, very slowly and very gently, that is what we are doing. As you lie there in the warmth and the dark, somewhere at the absolute other end of your experience, the ice is sitting at the bottom of the world. The stars above it are brighter than you have ever seen. The lakes below it are darker than you can imagine. The mountains are waiting in their frozen silence, and we are drifting toward all of it slowly, one quiet chapter at a time. For now, let the images settle. The ice wall at the edge of the sea, the ancient air locked in frozen bubbles, the hidden mountains in the dark, the lake that has been still for 20 million years. Let them settle into whatever half-dream is forming behind your closed eyes. There is no need to hold on to them. They will be there when we drift back. The world turns slowly tonight, and so do we. We were just beginning to talk about the people who first came to Antarctica, the sailors who saw it from a distance and turned back, and I mentioned that in the early 20th century men began to go further, to push inland, to walk into the white interior. Tonight we're going to sit with some of those stories, not as adventure tales told with urgency and drama, but as quiet human things. Stories about people who are very small, standing in a very large place trying to understand it. Imagine you're standing on the coast of Antarctica in the year 1901. The sky above you is a pale, washed-out blue. The sun sits low and golden on the horizon, even though it is the middle of the afternoon. The air so cold and so clean that every breath feels almost sharp, like breathing something purer than ordinary air. Before you, stretching away to the south, is an endless plain of white, flat in some places, wrinkled and ridged in others where the wind has sculpted the snow into long, curved shapes called sastrugi. The word comes from Russian and means something like grooves or furrows. Behind you is your ship, anchored at the edge of the ice, small and dark against all that white. The only human-made thing for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers in every direction. You know, standing there, that somewhere far to the south, weeks of walking, perhaps months, is the geographic South Pole, the very bottom of the Earth's axis, the point around which everything rotates. No one has ever been there. No one knows exactly what it looks like. No one knows what the journey will cost. This was the world that Robert Falcon Scott stepped into. Scott was a British naval officer, quiet and careful and deeply serious about his work. He led 2 expeditions to Antarctica, one beginning in 1901 and one beginning in 1910. And his story, and the stories of the men who travelled with him, have a quality that is unlike almost any other human story I know. Not because of the heroics, though there were heroics. Not because of the tragedy, though there was tragedy. But because of the silence in those stories. The long, slow, unspectacular days of walking across the ice, putting one foot in front of the other, pulling heavy sledges loaded with supplies in cold that does not care about any of it. The diary entries that Scott and his companions kept. Careful, thoughtful, sometimes surprisingly beautiful entries, written in small tents in the middle of an icy void. Those diaries are among the most quietly remarkable documents in human history. Scott wrote about the beauty of the ice, about the quality of the light at certain hours, about the strange, deep satisfaction of covering distance in a landscape where there are no landmarks, where every mile looks exactly like the last mile. He wrote about his companions with warmth and precision, about their moods, their humour, their endurance, about the small rituals that made life bearable in that extreme environment, the routine of setting up camp, the comfort of a hot meal at the end of a long march, the particular pleasure of crawling into a sleeping bag when your legs are exhausted. He wrote in the quieter moments about what it felt like to be in a place where no human being had ever stood before. And that feeling, that quiet, enormous feeling of being the first, is something that only a very few people in all of human history have ever experienced. We live in a world now where almost every place has been seen, mapped, photographed, and visited. The blank spaces on the map are almost all filled in. There are very few places left where a person can stand and know, with certainty, that no one has ever stood here before. Antarctica was, for a brief and extraordinary window of time, one of those places, and the people who walked into it carried that knowledge with them, like a weight and a gift at the same time. Chapter 8. The race that wasn't just a race. Breathe in slowly and out. The story I want to tell you now is one that most people know in outline but not in texture. the race to the South Pole, the competition between Robert Scott of Britain and Roald Amundsen of Norway in 1911 and 1912. But I do not want to tell it as a race. I want to tell it as two different ways of being in a very difficult place. Roald Amundsen was a Norwegian explorer, lean and practical and absolutely focused. He had spent years in the Arctic, learning from the Inuit people how to travel and survive in extreme cold. And he knew how to use dog sledges properly, how to work with the dogs, how to pace them, how to navigate across featureless terrain. He knew how to choose exactly the right equipment and the right clothing and the right food for a polar journey. When Amundsen decided to go to the South Pole, he approached it as a logistics problem. A serious, complex, dangerous logistics problem. But a solvable one, if everything was planned precisely. He spent a full Antarctic winter, that long, dark, isolated winter, at his base camp on the edge of the continent, preparing. He adjusted his equipment, tested his sledges, trained his team, moved his supply depots into better positions. He studied the terrain as much as he could from the information available. And then, in October 1911, he set off. His party of 5 men and 52 dogs moved south across the Ross Ice Shelf. They moved steadily, efficiently. They used the dogs the way the Inuit had taught, not as beasts to be pushed to their limits, but as partners in the journey. They covered good distances each day without exhausting themselves or their animals. They found a route up through the mountains onto the polar plateau, a difficult, frightening climb through a glacier system that no one had ever navigated before. But they found it, and then they were on the plateau, high, flat, bitterly cold but open, and they walked to the pole. On December 14th, 1911, Roald Amundsen and his 4 companions stood at the South Pole. They planted a Norwegian flag in the snow. They shook hands. Soz Amundsen wrote in his diary with characteristic understatement that the journey had gone well and that they had reached their goal. Then they turned around and walked back. They arrived at their base camp well fed and healthy, dogs still running, equipment intact. It had been a masterpiece of preparation and execution. Now picture Robert Scott on the same plateau, about 3 weeks later. Scott's party of 5 men reached the South Pole on January 17th, 1912. They had been travelling for more than 10 weeks. They were exhausted. They were colder than they had expected to be. Their equipment had not performed as well as hoped. Their food supply was tight. And when they arrived at the pole, they found Amundsen's tent, the Norwegian flag, a note left for Scott asking him to deliver a letter to the Norwegian king. Scott wrote in his diary that night. He wrote about his disappointment, not bitter, not angry, just deeply, quietly sad. He wrote, "The pole. Yes, but under very different circumstances from those expected." He wrote about how the polar plain looked, flat, windswept, featureless, just ice in every direction, no marker from nature, no visible sign that this point was any different from any other point on the plateau. Just a flag, just a note, and 800 miles of ice between his party and their ship. The return journey became one of the most sorrowful stories in the history of exploration. The weather was unusually harsh. The temperatures were colder than normal. One by one, Scott's companions began to struggle. Edgar Evans collapsed and died early in the march. Lawrence Oates, suffering from severe frostbite in his feet, unable to walk properly, knowing that he was slowing the others down, walked out of the tent one night into a blizzard and did not come back. He said, famously, that he was just going outside and might be some time. Those words, spoken quietly into a blizzard. There is something in them that is almost impossible to sit with fully. So we will not. We will just let them be there, like a stone in still water. Scott and his remaining 2 companions, Wilson and Bowers, were caught by a ferocious blizzard only 11 miles from a supply depot. They set up their tent and waited for the storm to pass. It did not pass. They died there, 11 miles from safety. Scott was the last to die. He kept writing in his diary to the very end. His last words were these: "I do not think we can hope for any better things now. We shall stick it out to the end, but we are getting weaker, of course, and the end cannot be far. It seems a pity, but I do not think I can write more. R. Scott." Last entry. "For God's sake, look after our people." They found his body 8 months later. His diary was still there, still readable. I'm not telling you this story to make you sad. I am telling it because there is something in it, in that small tent on the enormous ice, in those last careful words written in a cold that was almost beyond imagination, that feels very human, very tender, very true. We are small creatures. We try very hard. We do not always succeed. And sometimes the last thing we do is write down how we feel, in case someone later comes to read it. And someone did. We are reading it still. Sleep reset. Let me pause here, gently. We have been walking a long way tonight, through history and ice and the stories of extraordinary people. That is quite enough for one stretch of the journey. If your mind has been wandering a little, let it wander. If you are half asleep, that is the best place to be for a story like this one. Feel your breath, in and out, in and out. The air around you is warm, your body is heavy and soft. The sound of my voice is just a gentle presence, not demanding anything from you. You do not need to hold on to every detail. You do not need to remember the names or the dates. The story lives in the feeling of it, and the feeling is already there inside you. Just rest. We will continue in a little while. Chapter 9. The Animals of the Ice. Now let us move away from the human stories for a moment, and talk about the other creatures who call Antarctica home, because Antarctica, despite its cold and its darkness and its extreme conditions, is alive. Not in the interior, not on the polar plateau where nothing grows, but at the edges, on the coasts and the sea ice and in the ocean, Antarctica is surprisingly, richly, astonishingly alive. Imagine the coastline of Antarctica in summer. The ice has retreated a little from the shore. The sea is dark and cold and full of motion, and everywhere you look, there are animals. Seals on the ice lying in groups, their dark bodies enormous and rounded, their whiskers catching the sunlight. They move slowly on land, flopping and hauling their great weight with an effort that looks almost comical. But in the water, they're transformed, sleek and fast and utterly graceful, diving deep, hunting fish and squid in the dark water beneath the ice. Penguins on the rocky shores standing in their dense, noisy, chaotic colonies. If you have ever seen video of a penguin colony and found it immediately delightful, the waddling, the calling, the small dramas of nesting and feeding, imagine that multiplied by thousands, by hundreds of thousands. Antarctic penguin colonies can contain 1 million birds and more, and the ocean itself around Antarctica is one of the richest ecosystems on Earth. Why is such cold water so full of life? The answer is krill. Antarctic krill are small shrimp-like creatures, a few centimeters long. They exist in numbers that are almost impossible to comprehend. Often scientists estimate that the total mass of Antarctic krill in the Southern Ocean is somewhere around 300 to 500 million metric tons. The collective weight of all these tiny creatures together is greater than the weight of all the humans on Earth. The krill feed on tiny algae that grow on the underside of the sea ice, and on phytoplankton in the water, and everything else in the Southern Ocean feeds on krill. Fish eat krill, penguins eat krill, seals eat krill. And the largest creatures on Earth, the great whales, come to Antarctic waters specifically to eat krill. A blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on this planet, eats up to 4 tons of krill every single day. 4 tons of tiny centimetre-long creatures every day. The blue whale comes to Antarctic waters in summer when the krill are most abundant and simply swims through the dense clouds of them with its enormous mouth open, filtering millions of them through the baleen plates in its jaw with each great gulp. There is something wonderful about this, I think. The largest creature that has ever lived, sustained entirely by some of the smallest. Antarctica, from the surface, looks like nothing, like emptiness, like a blank, cold void. But just at its edges, just where the ice meets the sea, it is teeming. Life finding a way. Life always finding a way. Chapter 10. The Ice and the Air. I want to spend a little time now talking about something that might seem distant from Antarctica, but is actually deeply connected to every single one of us. The ice, not as a beautiful landscape or a historical stage, but as a piece of the planet's machinery, as something that keeps the whole system running. Antarctica's ice sheet is not just frozen water sitting at the bottom of the world. It is an active, powerful part of the Earth's climate system. It influences weather patterns thousands of miles away. It reflects sunlight back into space, helping to regulate the planet's temperature. It drives ocean currents that carry heat and cold and nutrients around the globe. The ocean currents are particularly important. The cold, dense water around Antarctica sinks to the bottom of the ocean and flows northward, along the ocean floor for thousands of kilometers. This movement of cold, deep water is part of what scientists call the global ocean conveyor belt, a vast system of connected currents that moves water around the entire planet, over a cycle that takes roughly 1,000 years to complete, 1,000 years for a single drop of water to make the journey. This conveyor belt influences the climate of places as far away as Europe and North America. The warmth of the Gulf Stream, which keeps northwest Europe significantly milder than its latitude would suggest, is part of this same vast system, and at the southern end of that system, driving the deep cold water northward, is Antarctica. The ice sheet also acts as a mirror. Fresh snow reflects about 90% of the sunlight that hits it. This is called the albedo effect. Albedo just means reflectiveness. Dark ocean water, by contrast, absorbs most of the sunlight that hits it. So the more ice there is, the more sunlight gets reflected back into space, and the cooler the planet stays. Remove the ice, and the dark ocean beneath absorbs more heat, and things warm faster. This is what scientists call a feedback loop. A change leads to a condition that makes more of the same change happen. It is one of the reasons that polar regions have been warming faster than the rest of the planet in recent decades. But I do not want to spend a long time on worry tonight. This is not a story about fear. There is enough of that in the daylight hours. I mention the ice's importance to the climate simply because it adds depth to the picture. Antarctica is not just beautiful. It is not just extreme. It is not just the setting for heroic stories. It is a functioning, vital part of the living system that makes this planet habitable. Without it, the world would be different in ways that are hard to fully map. With it, the world has a kind of balance, a cold, quiet, enormous counterweight at the bottom of the globe, doing its slow, important work, like a gentle anchor. Chapter 11. Darkness and Stars. As the night deepens, let me take you into the Antarctic winter once more. Not to frighten you with the cold, but to show you something beautiful about the dark. The people who choose to stay in Antarctica through the winter over cruise they are called, often describe the experience in terms that sound, at first, like hardship. The cold, the isolation, the months without sunlight, The need to live in close quarters with the same small group of people for months at a time without escape. And yes, those things are real challenges, but Winter Over Cruise also describes something else, something harder to name, a deepening, a kind of quiet that is different from ordinary quiet. Not empty, but full in a way that takes time to notice. The darkness, they say, is not oppressive once you make peace with it. It becomes a presence you can live inside, a vast, soft, surrounding darkness that has nothing hostile in it, just depth, just space, just the enormity of a sky with no competition from artificial light, no orange glow of cities on the horizon, nothing to dilute the extraordinary density of stars. The aurora australis, the southern lights, can appear in the Antarctic winter sky. The southern lights are the same phenomenon as the northern lights, the aurora borealis. Charged particles from the sun swept along the Earth's magnetic field lines, colliding with the upper atmosphere and releasing light. Green light mostly, but sometimes pink and red and purple, curtains and ribbons of colour moving across the dark sky. People who have seen the aurora australis over Antarctica describe it as one of the most overwhelming visual experiences of their lives. The sky's so clear, the stars so bright, and then the lights begin, shimmering and moving, filling the sky with colour, casting strange, beautiful shadows on the ice below. Some people cry when they see it, not from sadness, from something that is hard to name, something that feels like being reminded suddenly and physically of how large the universe is, and how brief your own moment in it is, and how that is not a frightening thing, but somehow a releasing one. How small we are, how very, very small, and how okay that is. The ice beneath the aurora does not care about smallness. It is just there, patient and enormous. The stars above it have been burning for billions of years. The lights move through their ancient recurring dance, and somewhere on that ice a small cluster of warm lights from a research station windows glows against the dark. Tiny, almost invisible, but there, people inside making tea, writing letters, looking out at the sky, small, warm, alive, existing gently in the middle of something immense. Maybe that is what we all are, wherever we are tonight. Small, warm, alive, in the middle of something immense. And that is enough. That is more than enough. Let your breath slow down now. In and out, in and out. We have come a long way in this part of the journey. We have walked with Scott across the polar plateau. We have watched the whales come south to feed on clouds of tiny krill. We have stood in the winter dark under a sky full of stars and southern lights. There is still more ahead. The hidden lakes beneath the ice, the ancient life that might exist in them, the deep, strange history of what Antarctica once was before the ice came. But all of that is for later. For now, there is just this, the quiet, the dark, your breathing, slow and easy, the story waiting patient as ice for whenever you are ready to drift further. The world turns slowly tonight, and so do we. We're going back in time, not a little, not a few hundred years the way we did with the explorers. We're going much, much further, tens of millions of years, back to a time when Antarctica did not look anything like it does today, back to a time when there was no ice at all. Imagine you're standing on the same landmass that is now Antarctica, but the year is not this year. It is not 1,000 years ago, or 1,000,000 years ago. It is 50 million years ago. The air around you is warm, not tropical, not blazing hot, but warm. The kind of warmth you might feel on a mild autumn afternoon. The sky above you is overcast with soft cloud, and there is a gentle, humid breeze. And beneath your feet, instead of ice and snow, there is soil. Dark, rich, wet soil. And growing out of that soil are trees, real trees, dense forests, ferns with enormous reaching fronds, flowering plants and mosses, and the sound, the actual sound, of wind moving through leaves. This is not speculation. This is what the fossil evidence tells us. Scientists drilling into the rocks and sediments beneath Antarctica have found fossils of ancient forests, pollen and spores from plants that needed warmth and liquid water to grow, fossilized wood from trees that are clearly related to species living today in places like Patagonia and New Zealand. 50 million years ago, Antarctica had forests. It had rivers running through these forests. It had insects. It had birds, almost certainly. Possibly small mammals. It had seasons, though they would have been strange seasons, affected by the same polar day and polar night that Antarctica experiences today. Long summers of continuous light and long winters of continuous dark. But it was alive. Richly, warmly, complexly alive. How is this possible? The answer is plate tectonics. And plate tectonics is the slow movement of the vast pieces of rock that make up the Earth's outer surface. These plates, enormous and heavy, move only a few centimeters each year. Across millions of years, that slow movement adds up to continents drifting across the globe. Antarctica has not always been at the South Pole. Long ago, very, very long ago, it was part of a larger supercontinent called Gondwana, which also included what is now South America, Africa, India, and Australia. These land masses were connected, warm and forested. As the plates moved, they pulled apart. Australia drifted north, South America drifted north and west, and Antarctica settled at the South Pole. But even there, at the pole, Antarctica remained relatively warm for tens of millions of years, because it was still connected to South America by a narrow land bridge, and that connection allowed warm ocean water to circulate freely, bringing heat from the tropics down to the southern continent. Then, the land bridge broke. Somewhere around 34 million years ago, the last connection between Antarctica and South America was severed by the separation of the plates. A new ocean passage opened up, the Drake Passage, between the tip of South America and the Antarctic Peninsula, and everything changed. When the Drake Passage opened, the ocean around Antarctica was able to flow in an unbroken circle for the first time. This circular current, the Antarctic Circumpolar Current, the strongest ocean current on Earth, began to flow, and it acted like a wall of cold water circling the continent, or keeping the warm tropical waters of the north away. Antarctica was isolated, cut off from the warmth, left alone with the polar dark, and it began to freeze, not overnight, not in a century or even 1,000 years, but over millions of years the ice built up. Snow fell and did not melt. Ice accumulated layer upon layer. The forests disappeared first from the interior, then from the coasts. The rivers froze, the soil was buried, the trees were gone, and the ice came. The same ice that is there today. Billions of tons of it, miles deep in places, covering the forests and the rivers and the rich, dark soil, like a slow, immense, permanent blanket. There is something strangely moving about this story. A green world slowly turning white, a forest slowly disappearing under ice, a continent once warm and alive at the edges, falling into a silence that has lasted 34 million years, and all of it still there beneath the ice, the roots of those ancient trees frozen in the soil, the pollen of their flowers preserved in the sediment, the river channels still carved in the rock, now buried under kilometers of ice that will not melt on any timescale a human mind can easily hold. A world still there, just waiting, very patiently in the cold and the dark. Chapter 13, Lake Vostok and the Question of Life. Now we are going to go deep, very deep, down through the ice, layer by layer, through the centuries and the millennia, and the millions of years, all the way to the bottom. to the dark water that has been sitting in silence since before our species existed. We're going to Lake Vostok. I mentioned it briefly in part 1, but now let us spend real time there. Lake Vostok sits beneath the Russian research station of the same name, near the centre of the East Antarctic ice sheet. The station sits at an altitude of about 3,488 metres above sea level, high and cold and exposed on the vast polar plateau. Below the station, the ice goes down and further down. For about 4 kilometres, the ice descends in layers that represent hundreds of thousands of years of accumulated snowfall, each layer a little older than the one above it, each holding its tiny trapped bubbles of ancient air. And at the very bottom of that ice, instead of rock, there is water. The lake formed because of a quirk of physics. Ice under extreme pressure, the kind of pressure created by 4 kilometres of ice sitting on top of it, has a lower melting point than normal ice. The pressure itself helps melt the very base of the ice sheet. Combined with a small amount of geothermal heat rising from the rock below, this creates a thin layer of liquid water at the bottom of the ice. Over millions of years, that thin layer collected in the low points of the hidden landscape below. In one particular deep basin beneath the polar plateau, the water accumulated into something much more than a thin film. It became a lake. Lake Vostok stretches roughly 250 kilometres from north to south, and about 50 kilometres from east to west. It is about 800 metres deep at its deepest point. The water is under enormous pressure from the ice above, about 350 times the atmospheric pressure at the surface. The temperature is roughly -3 degrees Celsius, below freezing ordinarily, but the pressure keeps it liquid. And this water has been sealed off from the surface of the Earth, from sunlight, from the atmosphere, from any outside input, for somewhere between 15 million and 25 million years. Scientists discovered its existence gradually, through radar soundings from aircraft, through satellite measurements of the ice surface above it, because the flat, still surface of the lake creates a distinctly flat area in the ice above it, visible from space. And then, after decades of scientific debate and careful planning, Russian scientists drilled down to it. In February 2012, after more than 20 years of drilling, the drill bit reached the lake water. A sample of water from Lake Vostok was brought to the surface for the first time in perhaps 20 million years. Think about that. Water that had been in complete isolation for 20 million years, brought up through 4 kilometres of ice into the cold, dry air of a research station on the polar plateau. What was in it? The first analyses were complicated by contamination concerns. Drilling through 4 kilometres of ice requires drilling fluid, and there were questions about whether microbes found in the initial samples were from the lake or from the drill hole itself. The scientific community was very careful, very cautious. Subsequent research, using more careful methods, found evidence that is extraordinary. The water contains dissolved oxygen at very high concentrations, 50 times higher than in normal freshwater lakes at the surface. This high oxygen level comes from the ice above, which slowly melts into the lake and brings dissolved air with it. And in that cold, dark, high oxygen, high pressure water, scientists found evidence of microbial life. Bacteria, ancient, adapted, surviving in conditions that would kill almost any organism we're familiar with. Living in total darkness, in water colder than a household freezer, under pressure that would crush an unprotected human body, with no sunlight and no connection to the world above. Living. The specific microbes found in Lake Vostok are still being studied. Some appear to be related to known bacteria from the surface world. Others are different enough to be genuinely mysterious. Some researchers believe that the microbial community in Lake Vostok has been evolving in isolation for so long that it may have developed in directions we cannot fully predict from what we know about surface life. This is speculative, and scientists are cautious about overstatement, but the possibility is there. Life, alone in the dark for 20 million years doing what life does, surviving, adapting, continuing. There is something deeply reassuring in that, I think. Life is very tenacious. Life finds conditions that seem impossible and makes them workable. Life does not give up easily. Even in the coldest, darkest, most isolated corner of the coldest, darkest, most isolated continent on Earth, something is still there. Something small and ancient and alive, floating in the dark water, going about the only business it knows, being alive. Sleep. Reset. Let's pause here for a gentle moment. We have gone very deep tonight. Into the ice, into the rock, into the ancient history of a continent that most people will never see. Into a lake that has been alone for 20 million years, and into the strange quiet courage of the tiny life that lives there. That is quite a journey for one night. If your thoughts have become soft and blurry, if the details are beginning to merge into a general feeling of depth and quiet and time, that is exactly how it should be. Let your jaw relax, let your shoulders drop, let your hands be still, breathe in very slowly and breathe out even more slowly. You do not need to remember any of this. The ice will remember. That is what ice does. You just need to rest. Chapter 14. The Dry Valleys. Antarctica hides one more secret I want to show you tonight. A place that almost no one knows exists, and that looks completely unlike everything else on the continent, the McMurdo Dry Valleys. Imagine flying in a small plane across the vast white plain of Antarctica. Below you, everything is the same. Endless white, broken only by the occasional dark line of a mountain ridge peeking through the snow. And then you come to the edge of something strange. The white stops. Ahead of you is a valley, actually a series of valleys, where there is no ice, no snow on the ground, just bare, dark brown rock. Wide, flat valley floors of gravel and sand. Rocky hills on either side, some with small glaciers clinging to their upper slopes but their lower sections completely exposed. It looks like a desert, because it is a desert. The McMurdo Dry Valleys are one of the largest ice-free areas in Antarctica. They exist because of the peculiar local geography. High mountain ridges block the flow of ice from the polar plateau, and the valleys themselves experience strong, dry winds called katabatic winds, which flow down from the ice sheet and evaporate any snow before it can accumulate. The result is a desert landscape in the middle of Antarctica, the driest, coldest desert on Earth. Average annual precipitation in the dry valleys is close to zero. It almost never snows there. The valleys have been ice-free in some places for thousands of years. The soils in the valley floors are so old and so undisturbed that scientists treat them with extreme care. A boot print in the wrong place can disturb surface layers that formed thousands of years ago. And yet, even here, even in this frozen, bone-dry, sun-blasted landscape, there is life. Tiny communities of microorganisms live inside translucent rocks, just beneath the surface, and where just enough sunlight penetrates to allow a thin layer of photosynthesis. These organisms, a community of algae, fungi and bacteria living together in the tiny spaces of a porous rock, are called endoliths. They're among the hardiest known life forms on Earth. They live inside rocks, in the driest, coldest desert on the planet. They do not grow quickly. They do not do much from our perspective. They simply exist very slowly in the few millimeters of protection offered by a translucent stone. There are also lakes in the dry valleys, not liquid lakes open to the air, but frozen lakes, covered by a permanent layer of ice several meters thick. Beneath that ice lid, the water is liquid, and in that liquid water there are microbial mats, communities of bacteria and algae that have been growing there, in the cold and the dim, filtered light for a very long time. When scientists take core samples from the bottom sediments of these lakes, they find layered communities that have been building up year by year for thousands of years. The layers tell a story of slow, patient growth in a place where everything is slow and patient. The dry valleys feel, to many who visit them, like another planet. And that is not just a poetic impression. NASA has used the dry valleys as an analogue for the surface of Mars, practicing the techniques and protocols they would use to look for life on the red planet. If life can persist in the dry valleys, the thinking goes, then perhaps it can persist on Mars too, in the right kind of rock, in the right kind of protected microhabitat, small and quiet and deeply patient. The idea that life might exist elsewhere in the solar system is one of the most quietly thrilling ideas in all of science. Not terrifying, not dramatic, just thrilling in the way that a light in a distant window is thrilling at night. Something there, far away, not threatening, just there, just alive. Chapter 15. What the wind carries. Let me tell you about the Antarctic wind. It is like nothing else on Earth. The winds in Antarctica are not just cold, they are structural. They shape the land, they move the snow, they carve the ice into the long curved ridges of sastrugi we talked about earlier. They are one of the dominant forces of the Antarctic environment, the way gravity or sunlight is a dominant force elsewhere. The strongest winds in Antarctica are the katabatic winds. The word comes from a Greek word meaning flowing downhill. These winds form when the cold, dense air on the polar plateau becomes heavy enough to flow down the slopes of the ice sheet toward the coast. As they descend, they gather speed. At the coast, katabatic winds can reach extraordinary velocities. Wind speeds of 200 km per hour have been recorded in Antarctica. Some places on the Antarctic coast are among the windiest places on the entire surface of the Earth. In one place, a region called Cape Denison near the coast of East Antarctica, the early explorer Douglas Mawson established a base in 1912. He chose the site partly for its accessibility, not knowing what the wind would be like. What he found was almost beyond belief. The average wind speed at Cape Denison, measured over a full year by Mawson's team, was nearly 80 kilometers per hour. 80 kilometers per hour. Average. Not gusts. Average. There were days when the wind was so strong that men could not stand upright. They crawled on their hands and knees. They tied ropes between the buildings so they could find their way from one structure to another in whiteout conditions. They learned to walk by leaning forward at an extreme angle, letting the wind hold them up. Mawson called his account of those years the home of the blizzard, and he is not exaggerating. But here is the strange thing about the wind. People who have spent time in Antarctica, even in the windiest places, often describe the quiet between the storms as being among the most profound silences they have ever experienced. Because when the wind stops, truly stops, the silence is absolute. There is no sound. Not the sound of insects which do not exist in the Antarctic interior, not the sound of birds which are only at the coast, not the sound of water moving because the water is frozen, not the sound of human activity unless you're right next to a station, just nothing. A silence so complete that you can hear your own heartbeat. That kind of silence is very rare in the world. Most of us live with constant background noise, traffic, appliances, other people, the ambient hum of civilization. We have almost forgotten what true silence sounds like. In the interior of Antarctica, you can find it, and people who have heard it say it does something to you. Something quiet and important, something that is hard to describe in words. But that feels like a kind of reset, like a return to something very basic, the silence beneath all the noise we usually live inside. Maybe you can find a little of it right now, wherever you are, whatever is around you. underneath all the sounds, if you listen very carefully, very softly, there is a quiet underneath. The quiet that is always there waiting. Just breathe into it, in and out. Let the silence be there, beneath everything. Chapter 16. The Ice Sheet in Motion. I want to show you one more thing before we close this part of the journey. The ice is not still. This surprises people. When you look at images of Antarctica, it appears solid and unchanging, like a photograph of something permanent. But the ice is moving, slowly, constantly, in ways that reveal the deep physics of frozen water under enormous weight. The Antarctic ice sheet is, in effect, a very slow-moving river. Snow falls on the interior of the continent. It compresses into ice. The ice accumulates until it is so thick and heavy that it begins to flow under its own weight toward the edges. It flows outward, toward the coast, millimeters or centimeters per day, in massive rivers of ice called glaciers. When these glaciers reach the coast, one of two things happens. Either they flow directly into the ocean and begin to float, forming the ice shelves we talked about at the very beginning, the great flat platforms of floating ice, like the Ross Ice Shelf, or they break off into large pieces called icebergs and drift away into the ocean. The icebergs of Antarctica are remarkable things, not the small, irregular chunks you might picture. Antarctic icebergs can be enormous, truly enormous. Tabular icebergs, this flat-topped with vertical sides, broken off from the ice shelves, can be hundreds of kilometers long. There are icebergs that have drifted in the Southern Ocean that are larger than the entire countries. In 2000, an iceberg called B-15 broke off from the Ross Ice Shelf. It was approximately 295 kilometers long and 37 kilometers wide. Its surface area was about 11,000 square kilometers, larger than the island of Jamaica. It drifted in the Southern Ocean for years. Pieces broke off from it. Those pieces drifted. Some of them were tracked for over a decade as they slowly melted in progressively warmer northern waters. A piece of Antarctica drifting north, carrying its ancient ice, its trapped air bubbles, its record of ancient atmosphere into warmer water where it slowly dissolved back into the ocean, the ice returning to the sea. There is a kind of cycle in that, a deep, slow planetary cycle of water leaving the ocean as evaporation, falling as snow, compressing into ice, flowing toward the shore, breaking off, drifting, melting, returning, everything in motion, even when it looks completely still. The ice that is there tonight has been there for hundreds of thousands of years, and it will be there for a long time yet. But it is moving. It has always been moving, flowing outward in its ancient, patient, glacial way, like time itself, always moving, always moving, even when it feels like nothing is happening at all. As we close this part of the journey, I want to leave you with that image. The ice in motion, barely perceptible, patient and enormous, flowing outward from the cold center of the world toward the ocean that surrounds it, and you, wherever you are, warm and still, your breath rising and falling, the night around you quiet and dark. Two stillnesses in different places, yours and the continent's, both real, both resting, both part of the same slow turning world. If your eyes are closed, let them stay closed. If your breathing is slow, let it stay slow. The story is not going anywhere. The ice is not going anywhere, and neither are you. Come in slowly. There is no hurry here, there never is. The story has been waiting for you, exactly where you left it, patient and still, the way the ice waits for everything. If you have been asleep and just surfaced for a moment, that is wonderful. Let yourself drift back down whenever you feel ready. The words will carry you. That is what they are here for. Settle your body. Soften your shoulders, let your hands be open and still. We have travelled far together in this story. We have stood at the edge of the ice shelf and watched it rise from the sea like a white cliff. We have walked with Scott across the polar plateau. We have gone down through 4 kilometres of ice to a lake that has been alone in the dark for 20 million years. We have stood in the dry valleys and heard, in the silence between windstorms, the deepest quiet on Earth. We are going to think less about facts and more about feeling, about what it means to stand at the edge of deep time and look into it, about what Antarctica teaches us quietly if we are willing to listen, about what the ice, in its ancient patience, knows. There is a concept in geology called deep time. It is not a complicated idea. It is simply the recognition that the Earth is very, very old, 4.5 billion years old, and that against that span of time, everything we think of as history, the pyramids, the Roman Empire, the rise of human civilization, the entire existence of our species, is so brief as to be almost invisible. Deep time is not an easy thing for human minds to hold. We are built for small time. We understand days and seasons and lifetimes. We can stretch a little to understand centuries, but millions of years, hundreds of millions, billions. Those numbers stop meaning anything to us emotionally, even when we can say them intellectually. Antarctica is one of the few places on Earth where deep time becomes, somehow, almost physical, almost tangible. When you stand on the ice and know that the layer beneath your feet fell as snow 10,000 years ago, that 1 kilometre below you is ice from 100,000 years ago, that 2 kilometres down is ice from 400,000 years ago, that the rock beneath all of that ice has been here for hundreds of millions of years, through the entire story of complex life on this planet, that the continent beneath you was once part of Gondwana, that it drifted, that it froze, that it has been sitting here in its cold isolation for 34 million years, while everything else on the planet changed and changed and changed again. You are standing in that moment on deep time made solid, and it does something to the sense of urgency we usually carry, not in a frightening way, not in a nihilistic way, that cold, hollow feeling that sometimes comes with thinking about how small we are, how brief our lives are, how little anything seems to matter. That is not what deep time feels like when you're in Antarctica and the sky's clear and the ice stretches away in every direction. It feels more like relief, like setting down something heavy you did not know you were carrying, like a long, slow exhale. Because if time is this big, then nothing is as urgent as it feels. The meetings and the deadlines and the worries and the plans and the things you forgot to do and the things you're afraid of, all of it is so brief, so genuinely, cosmically brief. And brief things can be beautiful precisely because they are brief. A snowflake, a candle flame, a human life, all of them real, all of them mattering, all of them belonging to the same enormous patient story. Chapter 18, The Scientists Who Stay. Let me tell you about the people who go to Antarctica today. Not the explorers of a century ago, but the scientists and support staff who visit now, in the age of helicopters and satellite phones and insulated research stations. They are a particular kind of person, not necessarily physically exceptional, though the work is demanding. Not necessarily reckless adventurers, though they live and work in one of the most extreme environments on Earth. They are mostly quietly passionate people who care deeply about a specific question or a specific piece of the world, and who are willing to go a very long way and put up with a great deal of cold and isolation to get closer to an answer. Glaciologists who want to read the ice cores and understand what the atmosphere was doing 500,000 years ago. Oceanographers who want to understand how the cold, deep water of the Southern Ocean flows and changes. Biologists who want to study the krill or the penguins, or the microscopic life in the subglacial lakes. Astronomers who set up telescopes on the high, clear, dry polar plateau, because the atmosphere there is the most transparent on Earth, perfect for looking at the cosmos. Physicists who study cosmic rays, which rain down constantly from deep space and are best measured in certain ways from the Antarctic interior. There is a detector buried in the ice near the South Pole, a vast array of sensors extending a cubic kilometre into the ice, that listens for neutrinos. Neutrinos are ghostly, nearly massless particles that pass through almost everything, generated by some of the most violent events in the universe. Billions of them pass through your body every second without touching a single atom. The detector in the Antarctic ice is called IceCube, and it has detected neutrinos from sources billions of light years away, signals that travelled across the universe for billions of years and then passed through 4 kilometres of Antarctic ice and were captured by a detector the size of a small city, buried in the oldest, quietest place on Earth. The universe, speaking to a frozen continent. There is something almost impossibly poetic about that. The people who work on IceCube and on all the other Antarctic research projects come from many different countries, where Antarctica is one of the few places on Earth governed entirely by international cooperation. The Antarctic Treaty, signed in 1959 by 12 nations and now supported by over 50, designates the continent as a place of peaceful scientific research. No military activity, no resource extraction, no territorial claims acted upon. In a world that often feels fractured and contentious, Antarctica remains by agreement a commons, a shared place, belonging to no one nation, and therefore, in a sense, to everyone. Scientists from countries that are sometimes in political tension with each other work side by side on the ice, share data, help each other in emergencies, because in Antarctica the environment itself is so demanding that old divisions become less important than basic human cooperation. The cold is the great equalizer. When it is -40 and the wind is rising and the equipment needs to keep running, it does not matter where you are from. You just help each other and go back inside and make something warm to drink and sit together in the small lit space against the enormous dark. Chapter 19. The Penguin's Long Walk. I want to take a softer turn now, away from physics and philosophy, and towards something that is simply beautiful and a little extraordinary. I want to tell you about the emperor penguin. The emperor penguin is the largest penguin species. They stand about 1 metre tall, roughly the height of a 5-year-old child, and weigh somewhere between 20 and 40 kilograms. They are black on the back and white on the front, with a patch of gold and yellow at the throat and sides of the head. They are elegant, almost regal, and they do something that is by any measure one of the most remarkable things any animal on Earth does. They breed in the Antarctic winter, not summer, winter. While every other sensible creature has retreated from the Antarctic interior, the emperor penguin walks toward it. In March and April, as the Antarctic autumn begins and the temperatures start to drop, emperor penguins leave the ocean, their feeding ground, and walk inland. They travel over the sea ice, which is growing and thickening as winter approaches. They walk, in single file or in loose groups, sometimes 50 or 60 kilometres from the open water. They walk to their breeding colonies, the same ones used year after year. And then they breed, in the dark, in the cold, in the howling Antarctic winter. The female lays a single egg, and then, having made the long walk and laid the egg and exhausted a significant portion of her energy reserves, she passes the egg to the male. He balances it on top of his feet, covered by a fold of warm belly skin called a brood pouch, and she turns around and walks back to the ocean. The male stays for approximately 2 months. He stands on the sea ice in the Antarctic winter, in temperatures that can drop to -60 degrees Celsius, in wind speeds that can exceed 200 kilometers per hour, holding one egg on his feet. He does not eat, he cannot eat, he has no way to feed. He simply stands there, holding the egg through the longest, darkest, coldest winter on Earth, waiting. But he does not stand alone. The males huddle together, hundreds of them, sometimes thousands, packed tightly against each other. They rotate slowly, the ones on the outside of the huddle pressing inward, the ones in the warmer centre gradually working their way to the edge. In this way, every bird spends time in the cold exterior and the warm interior, and the group as a whole conserves an enormous amount of heat. The huddle moves slowly, over time. It breathes, almost like a single organism. In satellite images, you can see it as a dark, slow-moving mass on the white ice. All of them holding their eggs, all of them waiting. After about 2 months, the eggs begin to hatch. The chicks emerge into the Antarctic winter, still dark, still brutally cold, and the males feed them with a small amount of nutrient-rich secretion from their esophagus, enough to keep the chicks alive for a few more days, and then the females return. They have been feeding at sea and are rebuilding their strength, and they come back, across the ice, in the dark, navigating by sound, by smell, by the unique calls of their mates, which they recognize among hundreds or thousands of nearly identical sounding calls. They find each other, in the dark, in the cold, across the ice. They find each other, and the male, who has not eaten in 2 months, who has lost nearly half his body weight standing in the winter dark holding a tiny egg, finally gets to walk to the ocean and eat. I find this story almost overwhelmingly tender. There is something in it about commitment and patience and trust, about doing a hard thing because it is the right thing for a small, fragile life you're responsible for, about standing in the cold and the dark and holding on, because holding on is what is needed. Not dramatically, not with complaint, just standing there, together, in the cold, waiting for the light to come back, and it always does. Chapter 20. What Remains. There is a layer in the Antarctic ice cores that scientists call the last glacial maximum. It marks the peak of the last ice age, around 20,000 years ago, when the ice sheets were at their greatest extent, when ice covered much of North America and Europe, when the sea level was around 120 meters lower than it is today, low enough that land bridges existed between places now separated by ocean, low enough that humans walked from Asia to North America across what is now the Bering Sea, 20,000 years ago. That sounds like a long time, and by human standards it is. There were human beings alive then, yeah, but they were living in very different conditions from us. They were hunters and gatherers, moving across landscapes that no longer exist. They painted animals on cave walls. They made tools from stone and bone. They looked up at the same stars we look at now. But in Antarctic terms, 20,000 years is nothing. The ice at that depth is not even close to the deepest ice in the cores. The oldest ice retrieved from Antarctica, from a site called Dome C, drilled by the European Project for Ice Coring in Antarctica, is about 800,000 years old, and scientists believe that even older ice, perhaps over 1 million years old, is waiting in other locations that have not yet been drilled. 800,000 years of continuous record. In those layers, you can read the entire rhythm of the ice ages, the way the climate shifted over and over between cold periods and warmer periods, the way carbon dioxide and temperature moved together, rising and falling in long, slow waves, the way the Earth breathed in and breathed out on a timescale of tens of thousands of years. We are right now in a warm period, an interglacial. The ice ages have not ended. They will return eventually on their astronomical schedule, driven by small but regular changes in the Earth's orbit and tilt. But right now we are in the warm part of the cycle. The world is mild, the oceans are full, The ice is where it is. And somewhere beneath the polar plateau, in a long cylinder of ice, stored in a freezer at a research station, is a layer that corresponds to right now, to this year, or to the air we breathe and the snow that fell this winter and the tiny chemical signature of everything happening on this planet at this particular moment. Someday someone will study that layer. Not us. Not our children, probably. Maybe not even our grandchildren. But someone, at some point in the future, will look at the ice from our era and read it. Will measure its gases and its particles. Will understand, from the evidence trapped in those tiny bubbles, what the world was like when we were alive. The ice will remember us. It remembers everything. Sleep reset. I want to pause here, very gently, and just be with you for a moment. We have come a long way tonight. Through deep time and ancient forests and frozen lakes and marching penguins and the quiet work of scientists at the bottom of the world. Through the stories of brave, cold, determined human beings and the lives of extraordinary animals and the slow, planetary machinery of ice and wind and ocean current. That is a full journey, a rich one, and you do not need to carry all of it consciously. Most of it, probably, has already slipped below the surface of waking thought, into the softer place where things become feelings rather than facts. That is the right place for it. Let your body be heavy now. Let your thoughts be slow and soft and not particularly attached to anything. Feel your breath, just your breath, in and out, in and out. The room is quiet, the night is deep, and somewhere, impossibly far away, the ice is moving in its ancient patient way, flowing outward from the cold centre, calving into the dark ocean, drifting north in great flat islands, slowly, slowly melting, returning to the sea, everything returning, everything in its time returning to where it came from. That is a peaceful thought, a very, very peaceful thought. Let it hold you for a moment. Chapter 21. The Quiet Continent. Antarctica has no indigenous people, no native human population, no ancient ruins, no buried cities, no traces of human life before the early 19th century. This is remarkable when you think about it. Every other continent on Earth has been home to human beings for thousands of years. Africa for hundreds of thousands of years. That is where our species first emerged. Asia and Europe for tens of thousands of years. Australia for at least 65,000 years. The Americas for at least 15,000 years. But Antarctica, nothing. No one. First, just not until the early 1800s did any human being set eyes on it. And not until the early 1900s did any human being set foot on its interior. It is the one place on Earth that has belonged entirely to itself. No human story written on its rocks. No names for its rivers in a 1,000-year-old language. No sacred sites. No burial grounds. No myths passed down through generations about what lives in those mountains. Just the ice. Just the wind. Just the animals that have adapted to live at its edges. There is a strange and poignant beauty in this, I find. In a world where almost every mountain has been climbed and named, every river explored, every forest mapped, Antarctica remained until very recently utterly beyond us. Beyond our reach, our knowledge, our stories. It didn't need us. It existed perfectly well without us for 34 million years. And in the brief period since we've known about it, we have changed it less than we have changed any other place on Earth. We have built small stations. We have drilled holes in the ice. We have counted the penguins and measured the krill and analysed the air bubbles. But we have not built cities there. We have not farmed it. We have not paved it or logged it or settled it. It remains largely what it has always been. A continent of ice and wind and dark water and ancient silence. The last place on Earth that is still mostly wild. And in a world that is increasingly not wild, increasingly filled with human marks and human noise and human busyness, the existence of Antarctica feels like a gift, even if you never go there. Even if you only know it from photographs and stories told in the dark, it is there, enormous and cold and patient and real, doing its ancient work, keeping its ancient silence, holding its ancient memory. While we live our brief, warm, noisy, beautiful lives. Chapter 22. The Feeling of Small. I want to end this part of our journey with a thought that I find personally very comforting. It has to do with smallness. We are small. Human beings are small. In terms of size, we are nowhere near the largest creatures on Earth. In terms of lifespan, we are brief compared to a tortoise, a tree, a glacier. In terms of our time on this planet, our entire history as a species is a whisper at the end of an incomprehensibly long story, and we know this. Most of us know this in some intellectual way, but we do not feel it, and not usually, not in our daily lives, surrounded by our things and our thoughts and our relationships and our plans. In daily life, we are the center. We have to be. That is how the mind works. Everything radiates out from us, our needs, our perspective, our timeline. But Antarctica has a way of shifting that. People who have been there, scientists, explorers, support workers, the rare tourist on a research vessel, almost universally describe a change in their sense of scale. Not a frightening change, not a diminishing one, more like a clarifying one. As if the enormousness of the place, the antiquity of the ice, the absolute indifference of the wind and the cold, brings a kind of perspective that is very difficult to find anywhere else. You are small, you are brief. And somehow, instead of being terrifying, that is okay. More than okay. It is freeing. Because if you are small, then your mistakes are not the end of the world. Your worries, though they feel enormous from the inside, are not the heaviest things in existence. The things you have not done, the ways you've fallen short, the weight of everything you carry, all of it is real, but all of it is also very, very small against the backdrop of 34 million years of ice. The continent does not judge. The ice does not compare. The wind does not care about your to-do list. There is only the cold and the quiet and the stars and the slow turning of the earth. And somehow, in that enormousness, there is room for you to simply be, without performing, without achieving, without becoming anything other than what you already are, small, warm, alive, here, and that is enough. That is quietly and completely enough. As this part of our journey comes to a close, I want you to carry that with you into your sleep tonight. Not as a grand philosophical statement, not as something to think about or analyze, just as a feeling. The feeling of being small in a large and ancient world. The feeling of the ice far away doing its patient work. The feeling of the stars above Antarctica tonight, burning in a sky with no light pollution, brilliant and indifferent and beautiful, and you here, warm, breathing slowly, safe, belonging to the same world as all of that. The penguins on their ice, the microbes in their dark lake, the glaciers moving their millimeters per day toward the sea, the neutrinos passing through the ice cube detector carrying messages from the far edge of the universe. All of it, one world. Nor all of it, one enormous, slow, patient, breathing story. And you are in it. You have always been in it. You have come such a long way tonight. From the edge of the ice shelf, rising white from a dark southern sea, all the way through the deep layers of frozen time, through the stories of the people who walked across the ice, and the creatures who stand in its darkness holding their small precious eggs. We are near the end now, and the end is not a sharp thing. There is no sudden conclusion, no final reveal, no dramatic moment, just a gradual quieting, like a piece of music that does not end so much as slowly become silence. That is how this story ends, with silence, with breath, with the feeling of something vast and patient surrounding you, holding you, letting you rest. So if your eyes are already closed, leave them there. If your thoughts have already softened into something loose and dreamlike, let them stay that way. You do not need to come back to full wakefulness for this final part. Let the words come to you from a distance, like sound travelling across a very still lake. Let them be quiet company in the dark. Breathe in and out. We're almost home. Chapter 24. The ice speaks slowly. In the deepest ice cores from Antarctica, the layers are so compressed, so tightly packed by the weight of everything above them, that a single year of snowfall might be only a millimetre thick. A year of weather, a year of seasons, a year of sunrises and sunsets and storms and calms, reduced to a single thin line in a column of ice. Think about a year of your life. Everything that happened, everything you felt. The conversations and the meals and the quiet evenings and the difficult days and the small moments of unexpected beauty. The things you will remember and the things you have already forgotten. All of it, if the ice were keeping your record, would be one thin line, 1 millimetre, and yet it would still be there, still real, still part of the record, nothing truly lost, just compressed, just small against the long measure of things. There is something about that which I find very tender. All the years, all the lives, all the days that felt so full and so important and so weighted with meaning, compressed over time into thin lines, but present, each one present if you know how to look. The ice keeps everything. Your days are kept too somewhere, not in ice perhaps, but in the people who knew you, and the places you moved through, and the small ways your existence shifted the world around you. Nothing is entirely lost, nothing disappears completely. It just becomes part of the longer story, the one that started long before us and will continue long after. And that is not a sad thought. Not tonight. Tonight, it is a peaceful one. Chapter 25. The Light Returning. In Antarctica, after the long winter darkness, there comes a day when the sun appears above the horizon for the first time in months. It is not a dramatic sunrise, not at first, just a thin sliver of orange and gold at the edge of the ice, lasting only a few minutes before the sun dips below the horizon again. But the people at the winter research stations, the small crews who have lived through months of dark, come outside to see it. All of them. Whatever they were doing, they stop and come outside. They stand on the snow in their heavy cold weather gear, breath clouding in the frozen air, and they watch that thin line of light at the edge of the world. And many of them cry, not because anything has been resolved, not because the hard part is completely over. There are still cold months ahead before the full warmth of summer returns, but because the light came back. It always comes back. No matter how long the dark, the light always comes back. And standing there on the ice, watching that first thin arc of gold appear at the horizon, there is a feeling. People describe it again and again in the same simple words of relief, of gratitude, of something loosening inside the chest that had been held tight for a very long time. The light came back, and I think about this sometimes, when the days feel long and heavy, when the dark feels like it has been going on too long. The light comes back, not always on the schedule we want, not always in the form we expect, but it comes. It has been coming back in Antarctica for 34 million years, through ice ages and warm periods and storms and silences beyond all imagining. Every winter, the dark, and every spring, the light, sliding above the horizon again, soft and golden, making the ice glow pink and amber and pale gold, making the people standing on the ice cry with relief. The light comes back, always. Chapter 26. What the Penguins Know. The emperor penguins are back at the ocean now. The ones who stood all winter in the dark holding their eggs are rotating slowly in the huddle to share the warmth. They have completed their extraordinary task. The chicks have hatched, the females have returned, the males have walked back to the water and slipped beneath the surface, finally feeding. The chicks are growing. By midsummer they will be large enough to enter the ocean themselves. They will stand at the water's edge, looking at the dark water, hesitating in the way that all young creatures hesitate at the edge of the unknown. And then they will go in. They will discover that they are extraordinary swimmers, faster and more graceful in water than they could ever be on land. They will spend most of the rest of their lives at sea, coming back to the ice only to breed, only to stand through another winter, only to hold another egg, and their chicks will do the same. And their chicks' in the same colonies, in the same cold, under the same stars for as long as the ice is there and the ocean is full and the ancient rhythm continues. There is something deeply reassuring about that continuity. The penguins do not know about deep time. They do not contemplate the 34 million years of Antarctic ice or worry about the shape of the continent beneath their feet. They do not know that scientists are watching them from research stations, counting them, tracking their movements, measuring the health of the krill population that sustains them. They just do what they do. They walk to the colony. They hold the egg. They wait. They find each other in the dark by the sound of one specific voice among thousands. They go back to the sea, and in their not knowing, there is a kind of wisdom that is very hard to argue with. Just do the next thing. Just be where you are. Just hold what you are holding. The ice will take care of the rest. Sleep reset. If you are still here with me, still listening in the dark, I am glad. And if you've been asleep for the last hour and have only just surfaced for a moment, I'm glad of that too. Everything is fine. The night is still and quiet. Your body is warm. Your breath is slow. There is nothing you need to do right now. There is nothing you need to be right now. Just this. Just here. Just breathing. Let your muscles go soft. Let your thoughts drift without holding on to any of them. They're just passing through like clouds over the Antarctic plateau. Let them come and let them go. You're safe. You are resting. The world is turning slowly outside, doing its ancient, patient work, and you are in it, small and warm and alive, exactly where you should be. Chapter 27. The deep water. Moving far beneath the surface of the Southern Ocean, the cold, heavy water that sinks near Antarctica is beginning its long journey. It will travel north, slowly, along the ocean floor. It will carry its coldness and its dissolved oxygen deep beneath the tropical seas, beneath the Atlantic and the Indian Ocean and the Pacific. It will take centuries to complete its journey. The water moving along the bottom of the ocean right now began its descent near Antarctica, perhaps 500 years ago, perhaps 1,000. The ocean is patient in a way that is hard to comprehend from the surface. While we have been talking tonight, while you have been lying there in the dark listening to the story of the frozen continent, that deep cold water has been moving, a few centimeters, perhaps a meter, sliding north along the ocean floor in the absolute dark, pressed down by the weight of the entire ocean above it, carrying the memory of Antarctic cold places that will not feel it for centuries. This is the time scale on which the planet operates. Centuries for a drop of water to travel from Antarctica to the tropics, millions of years for a continent to freeze, billions of years for a planet to form, cool, develop life, watch that life slowly grow more complex, and here, at the very end of that enormous story, For the blink of an instant, this, you and I, a voice in the dark and someone listening, a story about ice and time and small, warm creatures standing in the cold, this small, brief, genuine thing. Chapter 28. What we carry. I want to tell you one last thing about the Antarctic explorers, not the famous ones, not Scott or Amundsen or Shackleton, whose stories have been told many times and will be told many more. I want to tell you about the ones whose names are less known, the sailors and support staff and dog handlers and cooks who made all the famous expeditions possible, the ones who kept the ships running and the stoves lit and the supply depots stocked, the ones who waited at the base while others walked toward the pole. Their stories are less dramatic, but in some ways they are the most human. They waited, they maintained. They repaired things and cooked meals and kept records and watched the weather and simply kept the whole enterprise running, day after day, in conditions that were difficult and cold and isolating. And when the famous explorers came back, sunburned and frostbitten and exhausted and changed by what they had seen, it was these quiet, steady people who were there to meet them, who made them something hot to eat, who listened to the stories, who helped them back. Exploration is possible because of waiting, because of quiet, patient maintenance, because of the people who hold things steady while others go to the edge. We do not often celebrate that kind of work, but it is in many ways the most important kind. The holding steady, the keeping going, the making of small meals in cold places, the being there, reliably, when someone needs you to be. Maybe you are that kind of person. Maybe you have spent more of your life holding steady for others than going on great visible adventures. Maybe your contribution has been quiet and sustaining and behind the scenes. That matters. That matters enormously. The ice sheet is full of it. Not just the dramatic surface, the visible white expanse, the spectacular icebergs, but the deep, slow, invisible movement of ice and water and cold that does its work without fanfare, without recognition, that has been doing its work for 34 million years. Quiet, steady, essential. Chapter 29. The softest landing. We are nearly at the end now. The story has been long and gentle, I hope, and full of things worth holding for a moment before letting go. You've travelled far tonight, without moving, to the edge of the world and beneath it, through deep time and frozen lakes and winter darkness and the first golden light of a polar spring, through the stories of people who are brave and cold and human, and animals who stand in the dark holding the fragile future in their feet, and through all of it, one thing has remained constant: the ice, patient and enormous and ancient and quiet, doing its slow work, remembering everything. The ice does not worry. The ice does not rush. The ice does not wonder if it is doing enough or being enough, or measuring up to some standard it has failed to meet. The ice simply is. Layer upon layer upon layer, each one a year, each one a season, each one a quiet accumulation of ordinary days building up into something that takes millions of years to fully appreciate. Or you're building something too. You may not see it clearly. Most of us cannot while we're in the middle of it, but the days are accumulating quietly, the way snow accumulates. The ordinary days and the difficult days and the days that felt like nothing special. They're all there, all part of the same slow, patient record. All real, all kept. Chapter 30. The Last Quiet Shore. Imagine, one last time, the coast of Antarctica. It is late summer. The sun is low and golden, casting long shadows across the ice. The sea is dark and calm. There is very little wind. The air is cold and clean and impossibly clear, so that distant mountains seem close enough to touch. A small group of Adelie penguins stands at the water's edge. They are looking out at the sea, not hurrying, not calling to each other in the way they do in the busy colony. just standing there at the edge of the ice in the beginning of the ocean, looking out. What are they looking at? Nothing, probably. Or everything. The water, the horizon, the light on the surface of the sea, the simple fact of the world existing. After a while, one of them steps forward and slides into the water, and then the others follow one by one. Their shapes vanish below the dark surface, and the ice at the edge is empty again. Just the water, lapping very quietly against the ice. Just the mountains distant and still. Just the golden light on everything, and the silence. The deep, clean, Antarctic silence that has nothing hostile in it. That is simply the sound of a very large and very old place, existing without needing anything from you. Breathe in that silence now. Let it come all the way in, and let it out slowly. You've been such a good traveller tonight. Patient and quiet and willing to go slowly, which is the only way to go in a place like this. You have looked at the ice and the darkness and the ancient buried lake and the stars above the winter plateau and the small warm light in the research station window. You have stood, in your imagination, at the bottom of the world, and it was not frightening. It was just large and quiet and very, very old. And somehow being in the presence of something that old and that patient and that indifferent made everything feel a little more possible. A little lighter, a little less urgent. The world is old, your troubles are small, your kindness matters, your rest is real and necessary and good. The ice is still there. The penguins are swimming now beneath the dark water, fast and graceful, entirely in their element. The deep cold water is flowing north along the ocean floor, doing its patient ancient work. The stars above Antarctica are brilliant and still. The aurora is beginning perhaps to shimmer at the edge of the dark sky, green and pale and moving like slow fire. And you are here, warm, breathing, safe. Let your thoughts be easy now. Let them soften and blur and become less like words and more like weather. The kind of gentle, directionless weather of deep sleep, where nothing is quite solid and everything is quite all right. The story is done, or rather, the story is never done, because the ice keeps going and the planet keeps turning, and tomorrow more snow will fall on the polar plateau and be added to the record. One more thin line in the long, long memory of the ice. But our part of the story for tonight is finished. And you can rest now, fully, completely, without reservation. The world will take care of itself while you sleep. It has been doing so for 4.5 billion years. It is very good at it. You do not need to watch over it tonight. Just close your eyes, if they are not already closed. Just let the breath come and go, easy and slow, easy and slow. Just be here, in the warmth and the quiet, at the end of a long and gentle journey. Thank you for travelling with me tonight. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being willing to go slowly and sit with old things and let the ice teach you what it knows about patience and silence and the deep untroubled passing of time. Sleep well, you're safe. The world is old and quiet and still, and so, at last, are you. Good night.